What's going on, everybody? If your decks are at their full height, now would be a time to lower them because we are kicking into the third season of Star Trek Lower Decks. Right after this brief bit of pause, I do want to point out that I posted a recent video about my thoughts leading into the third season of Lower Decks, how I feel about the show in relation to current Star Trek. So if you haven't checked that out, you may want to do that before launching into my review here. And if you're new here in general, I am going to spoil things, but this is Lower Decks, so the plot kind of comes second to the Star Trek callbacks and Easter eggs. Not a whole lot to spoil here, but if you do want to watch the episode first, please feel free to do that and then come back. Launching into the first episode of Season 3 entitled Grounded, we've got a sort of a brief breakdown of the events that ended Season 2 here on the Federation News Network. They are letting us know that Captain Freeman is going on trial for her sabotage of the Pac-led planet that she was arrested for at the end of Season 2. I do want to show a few things here because there are Easter eggs and callbacks to Star Trek in the ticker tape at the bottom of the Federation News Network here. We have Admiral Jellicoe, and you need to say that slowly because Captain Jellicoe worked. Admiral Jellicoe, saying that quickly makes you want to throw an L on the end of his name. He's been promoted. Good to see that he's actually doing well for himself. Then we've got a reference to the Buffalo Solar Knights playing the London Kings. That's a callback to, I think, Deep Space Nine is the first time they were mentioned, but if I'm wrong about that, I'm sorry. And we also have a mention here to the Zach Dorn, youngest to be crowned a Stratagema Grandmaster. That was that little game we saw Data play back in Season 2. You know, fun little callbacks to what I think are more dark recesses of Star Trek nerddom. Like, they're not the most popular or the most well-known, and especially this next one, who I found to be my favorite callback from these scenes, Sonny Clemens. That's right, the first, in my opinion, the prototype of Trip Tucker. This fella here from the end of Season 1 of TNG, he was one of those individuals who was cryogenically frozen back in the 90s and resurrected when the Enterprise came across him in that neutral zone season. So the main takeaway from that episode was, you know, the reintroduction of the Romulans. However, we had these four characters. Was it four? Three characters. There was him, there was the Wall Street stockbroker, and there was the woman who was very much missing her family. I think those were the only three. Being reawoken a few hundred years in the future and trying to reacclimate to what's going on. He was a country music star, so good to see that he's got his career back on track. It's not the greatest episode of Star Trek by a long shot, but the premise behind these people waking up in the future was very, very thought-provoking to me as a kid, and there's going to be somebody else that also woke up in the future that we meet later in the episode, but I won't spoil that. I'll get to that when we get to it. So now back to the plot. Beckett Mariner is very, very frustrated that she can't really do anything to help her mother. She doesn't want to sit there and wait for the court to work it out because she has no faith in them, so she's talking to her father. And we also have the new intro here, which is basically the same as the old intro. However, they've added some more things. Always nice to see the crystalline entity, and I just wanted to point that out. Doesn't have anything to do with the plot, but I do like a good crystalline entity. I think we only saw that twice in the actual show, so. And now we are back on Earth. Boimler is on his family vineyard, and I think this has a bit more credence to my theory that Lower Decks is just a television program within the Star Trek universe because they're just kind of aping things that are famous within Star Trek. So he's got the same clothes, he's got the same situation as Picard, except this vineyard makes raisins, not wine. So I think that this would just be a television show taking into account Jean-Luc Picard being famous for his vineyard. I mean, they sell their wine. It is a television program, or the equivalent of the 24th, 25th century version of a television program within the Trek universe. So I think that's fun. I think that actually makes this show more fun. Then we have another fun callback here to Cisco's Creole restaurant in Nolans. And we don't actually have a cameo from any of the Ciscos. Obviously, Brock Peters has died, so unless they were to use, archived footage of him, he wouldn't have worked out. But Jake Sisko maybe, or I don't think they would have brought Avery Brooks back just for a brief cameo, but Jake might have been a good one to have here. Or maybe even show Nog in the background because he used to frequent this place. I know the actor is dead there as well, but that could have been a fun Easter egg for him, a fun way to get him into the episode just to show Nog in the background eating some grubs or something. It's fun to see all these Deep Space Nine callbacks. However, we still haven't had any real returning guests from Deep Space Nine that actually have anything to do with the plot. So I'm hoping we get to see more of that at some point. We've got a lot more Easter eggs here. We've got the Ketracel white hot sauce and things of that nature. They decide they need to break into the Cerritos in order to get Boimler's logs. That's the only thing that might help clear Captain Freeman's name, because the actual logs of the ship were destroyed or corrupted because of some sort of radiation that was occurring during the Pac-led battle in Season 2. They're going to try to get onto the ship by breaking into this transporter facility and beaming onto the ship. Once they break in, they determine that the man running it is just a friendly old grandpa type, and they don't want to clock him over the head to steal the transporter. He's got a collection of a whole slew of transporters we've seen in Star Trek in the past, so that was a fun thing to see as well. Lo and behold, they can't transport onto the ship because we've got these spacefaring organisms which are disrupting transporter patterns around Earth currently. That was foreshadowed at the beginning of the episode. It was shown on the news network right before they turned it off, so it's not just coming out of nowhere. They determined that they need to go now to Bozeman, Montana, the site of first contact, in order to, in essence, steal the Phoenix, or a Phoenix replica, to pilot themselves to the Cerritos since they can't transport there. A whole lot of callbacks and Easter eggs here. I'm not going to go through them all. It's basically a theme park for First Contact. They play the First Contact music. We've got Zephram Cochrane, voiced by the First Contact version of himself, James Cromwell. That's right, there was another actor in the original series playing him, but for all intents and purposes, James Cromwell has been the definitive version of Zephram Cochrane from First Contact. Played him again in Enterprise, and now is reprising the role in Lower Decks. Always great to hear him, and this was very fun. They played the music. We have a lot of Easter eggs to ships and events and the jukebox and all those things. We even have a hologram of him here who pilots the ship, takes out that little data disk, plays Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf, and just an overall great scene. We've got this character in the back who... he's a botanist. He freaks out and ends up going into space for the first time. And then once they pilot the ship, dock it at the Cerritos, they're like, we'll send you back to Earth. He's like, ha ha ha, no, I'm just going to go travel the stars. So that was a fun moment. They get on the Cerritos, find the logs from Boimler. Turns out they're not going to be a great help because he's kind of an idiot in the logs. He's just talking a lot of nonsense, saying jokes, saying personal things about himself. It's not going to work for their needs. So Beckett Mariner is a little freaked out now. She's like, our whole plan is falling apart. Okay, new plan. I'm going to steal the Cerritos. So she shoves the three characters in the runabout or a shuttlecraft, shoots them out of the shuttle bay, and she is now stealing the Cerritos so she can go on a grand adventure to clear her mother's name. I really actually like this. So Boimler, in order to trick the shuttle into returning to the ship, reprograms it to think that Earth, where it was programmed to return, is actually the Cerritos. So he reprograms in the database that the Cerritos is Earth, so the shuttle returns to the Cerritos instead of the real planet Earth. However, the shuttle thinks that it's approaching a planet, so it doesn't slow down because it's assuming that the gravity well of Earth is going to be there, the atmosphere is going to be there. It crashes into the shuttle bay a bit harder than they intended. I actually liked that little bit of a science fiction-y Star Trek type of solution thrown in there. So that was probably one of my highlights. Turns out that they were detected leaving dry dock unofficially, without permission, without clearance. So a couple of ships are like, you know what? What's going on? We're going to beam aboard and figure out why you're taking out the ship with no clearance. They come up with a quick plan that actually, no, we do have clearance. We're here to study these, I keep calling them microorganisms. I believe they may have been called microorganisms in the show itself, but clearly they are massive, massive creatures. I don't think they're actually microorganisms. They're extremophiles that live in space, and they're coming here to breed. It actually turns out that they want to use the Cerritos as a breeding ground, so lo and behold, they kind of fell into a solution to their problem even without meaning to, and they put some in the shuttle bay and pretend when the security officers come on board that, oh, we need to facilitate their breeding, and they're getting shocked, they're getting gooey. It's not a fun time for them, but it's kind of a win-win situation, except they're like, all right, fine, we understand this is a great opportunity for you guys, but we just need to find out who authorized you to be here. What was the captain that put their name on the order? So they're like, well, we're screwed, we're frelled, and lo and behold, out of the blue, Captain Freeman herself says, I authorized this. Everybody is shocked. So apparently the entire trial went on while our characters were attempting to come up with a way to rescue her from Starfleet Tribunal. We never got to see a bit of it. So now Captain Freeman lets us know what happened. And this is another fantastic callback. Apparently, a special operations team went undercover to Pac-Led to try and uncover the truth, led by Captain Bateson. And if you recall from Cause and Effect in TNG, a very, very brief scene, that was Kelsey Grammer, Frasier himself, caught in that time loop for a hell of a long time. So he is a very, very more militant type captain because he was engaged in a Klingon war type era of the Federation, of Starfleet. So he was a much less exploratory captain, so it makes sense that he would undergo such a situation. And it's good to see him. He was not voiced by Kelsey Grammer, but that does lead some hope to the fact that we may see a return of Kelsey Grammer as this character in a future Star Trek project, and I think that may be something fun. He did have some adventures in the novels. There is basically a Starfleet support group for characters who had been taken out of time. I always found that a very intriguing situation, something that was worth following up on, because all these characters we've met out of time, we never follow up with them. We bring them to the future, they come to the future, and then they're written off and we never really hear from them again. I would love a follow-up with all these characters. We find out that he led the extraction team, got this guy out. Tuvok, another cameo here, not voiced by Tim Russ, has no voice whatsoever. He did a mind meld, I suppose, to figure out what the true situation was. Something I would like to see in the novels, I believe Tuvok was a very, very high-ranking member of Captain Riker's Titan crew. I think that would be fun, too, to see him on the Titan. And it turns out that the Pac-Leds came up with a plan themselves. They were hoping by destroying their own capital city, the Federation would rehome them to a better world with more resources, blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the day, the Starfleet and Federation task force and the courts and everything, they did what they were supposed to do. They found the truth. They freed our captain here. Everybody wins, except for Beckett Mariner, who apparently still does not trust Starfleet to do the right thing. That seems to be her character arc. So at the end of the episode, it's determined that nothing that her mother, nothing that her father has ever done or will do is enough. They're going to put her under Commander Ransom's direct control. She's going to report directly to him. So he is in essence in charge of her future. If she screws up, her parents aren't going to be able to get her out of it. It is up to her to behave, or else Commander Ransom is going to be, you're out of Starfleet. That's in essence the episode. I talked a lot more about the plot than I thought I would. It's not a bad plot. I enjoyed the episode, but I would say this series, and particularly this episode, is more invested in Easter eggs and callbacks, in bringing in a lot of stuff we've already seen in Star Trek, than really advancing the world in and of itself. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, because we've seen by trying to advance the Star Trek universe in things like Picard Season 1 and part of Picard Season 2, and even in Discovery when they go into the future, that some of those advances and some of those storylines are not loved and not treated by the fans as anything good. So I think that by setting this in a near future from the Star Trek we know, and by bringing in a lot of familiar elements outside of canon, in my opinion, it's a fun ride. It's a fun bucket of nostalgia, for lack of a better term. It's just nice to see a lot of these Star Trek things given the love that a lot of us fans have, and it doesn't really impact anything. And it's not changing the course of history. It's not changing the future. It's not overwriting things we've seen before. It's just paying homage to them, repackaging them in a fun, entertaining 22 minutes. And it's just a nice ride to kind of cleanse our palate from a lot of the bleaker, darker stuff we're seeing out there. So that's my opinion on the first episode of the third season. I don't know how I'm going to do these episode breakdowns in the future, depending on the plot Easter egg ratio. I'm definitely not going to go over all the Easter eggs, Just going to point out ones that are fun to me. So do all those YouTube things, like, share, subscribe, comment, tell me what you thought, tell me what you didn't like, what you did like. And until next time, keep on lowering those decks.